Howdy everybody. Here to do sort of a funny video, but I wanted to include some good information in it and show off some pretty flowers as I did. So this entire video was inspired by the fact that I'm always hearing that fear-mongering type content for gardeners gets a lot of views. So this is going to be my shot at it. I've been hearing for at least 2 decades of my life now that any election cycle, the whole thing's gonna burn down and everyone's gonna starve and die. I don't know. Hell, maybe the Mayans just missed a few leap years and, that's why we're all about to die. But, clearly everyone I talk to can't be wrong. We must all be dying very soon. There's a pile of deer crap in the middle of my gardens. Free fertilizer. But since we're obviously all going to die any day now, and we have been about to die any day now for the last, 20 years, figured I'd show off the beauty of the garden and talk about what I would recommend to actually help with that. It's a very pretty wasp moth I'm not familiar with seeing. Kind of a yellow head and blue body. Oh well, but in case anyone watching my content actually is worried about things falling apart, and I can absolutely understand why you're worried about it, whichever side of politics you come from. There are legitimate fears in this world, many of them in fact. So I'm going to go over what I think you really need to keep in mind to grow if you're worried about it. You need calories more than anything else. You need enough vitamins to keep you from dying, and you need a little bit of protein. Protein, I would not say, is the absolute most important part of this recipe, so to speak, but you will need some protein. And unless you're already raising animals, you're probably not going to have a very fun time trying to figure all that out after things go to crap. So, how do you solve that problem now instead of getting to that point? Well, protein-rich crops such as beans, a lot of seed crops such as quinoa, many options for your protein sources, but start looking into plant proteins. So, that historically has largely always been legumes, your beans, your peas, favas, all sorts of options. You find what works for you, but you get some kind of a protein source going. You get good at it. You plant a bunch of them on your first year and you see which ones grow in your area, and you get good at growing them because that's a big lifeline. Little baby asparagus. But what you do next is you find a couple calorie crops. Ideally, you want a couple of each type of crop I'm talking about here, so that you're not just basing all this entirely on, one thing or one crop. Here's my peace garden apple. Something keeps eating the lower branches, so it's getting a little taller than I'd like, but we'll let it go for now. But you probably want to grow a grain. Find a grain that works well where you're at. And I would highly recommend, as a calorie source, unless you're somewhere extremely hot, potatoes. I don't have any potatoes right in this area to show you. I do have sunchokes. I suppose I should talk about them first. Sunchoke can take some extreme cold and some okayish amounts of heat. Hail damage from a bit ago. Just the tops. These tops are edible, but they're hairy, not really pleasant to eat raw. You could saute them in desperation. Great multi-use plant in the sunflower family. A lot of the same usableness as a sunflower, but these produce tons of tubers that are almost as good as a potato. In fact, in the current world, they're considered better than a potato. They're 40% lower on the glycemic index. Now, if things go to hell, you might want more glycemic index. You want those calories, but these are still very high calorie crop. Very good option. Highly recommend them. So, sunchoke's a great calorie crop. Tomatoes, Myoga ginger, beautiful wildflowers I got in a pack. Let's see, we'll get back to potatoes, but let's talk about nutrients for a second. Nutrients, or minor nutrients, vitamins and minerals, you get a lot of them from potatoes and grains, but growing fresh veggies and fresh fruit is a great option through summer. You also want things that store well through winter. So if you're looking for winter crop options, aka things that grow in summer and you can store for winter, if you're somewhere hotter than me, you lucked out because you get a 2-for-1. Sweet potatoes have pretty much all the vitamin benefits of what I grow with higher calories. So you get something that covers both your calorie basis and your vitamin basis in sweet potatoes. They're a wonderful crop. But they don't grow as well here as they do in the south. I've not had luck yet. So what do I grow for wintertime vitamins if I can't grow, the same thing as I would recommend others? Well, here's a huge potato patch, and we're going to come back to it, but right nearby my potatoes, here we go. This is a huge pile of pumpkins. I didn't even plant. Excuse me, I'm about to sneeze. Oh, I'm sorry about that, everybody. But this is my winter vitamins. I can also can and preserve and dry a lot of things, and that's a great option too. But squash can oftentimes last most of the way or all the way through the winter, sometimes all the way until next harvest, depending the variety. But those blossoms way down in there, they're all closed right now because they open more when the weather's a little bit less harsh. But you can eat those blossoms in summer. A lot of those are going to be male blossoms, so you don't actually need the plants to keep that many. But this was grown simply by when I scooped the guts out of a pumpkin that we were eating, or maybe a few pumpkins if they were small. I then put them all in a bucket and tossed them on the ground, covered them in mulch, just to feed the trees. No intention whatsoever of getting pumpkins, but generally that's how pumpkins like to grow. They love excessive compost. So they'll grow right out of a compost pile, happy as can be, and that's an oftentimes way that people grew them historically. There's another patch of pumpkin, same thing. So that's one of my big vitamin sources through winter. There are many other options. You can grow cabbages and make sauerkraut. You can do all sorts of things. Of course, you come out of winter and you've just about run out of your vitamins and minerals. You're drying up even if you've been eating them because they don't contain everything. So that's where something like asparagus comes in. It comes up super duper early and you get some fresh greens in you before anything else has really had time to get ready to produce. So I do love asparagus. But back to the calories. Right here, potato. Got some grass right here to yank. Hopefully I don't disturb the root system of the tater too much. But I like to grow potatoes in mulch because the potato does not put any tubers any further down than it was planted. So there we go. This is not a potato root. There's a specific name for this, but this has a potato on the end. And all I do is put it right back in like that. You can't do that in soil. You will have disturbed the roots too much and the plant will die. But in wood chips or other mulch sources, you can steal, as I call it, you can steal your own potatoes. Yes, you won't have as many for harvest later, but when you have so many potatoes as I do, that big green patch back there, and other patches all over, stealing some potatoes from your future self is not such a problem. Potatoes have some vitamins. They're not just calories, so they're pretty healthy food. But, you know, they're a great calorie crop. Nutritionally very similar to a grain. Corn grows well here. I grew corn last year. So there are many options. But if you're really worried about everything falling apart, I recommend you at the very least start learning what varieties grow well for you, packing enough seed for each of those varieties you like up into bags, and putting it in your refrigerator at the back so they last as long as possible, and forget about them. Unless you plan to garden all the time, that should at least keep them good for a few decades, for if things ever fall apart, you can come out and have as much as you like, as much as you need to survive. Of course, no matter what, you're going to have to survive until harvest. So you got to have plans. You got to do your thing if you're worried about all this. But, you know, you got to have something to fit those three needs: your calories, your proteins, and your vitamins. Here, I've got more beans popping up. So, you know, just trying to get you guys some stuff to think about in what's mostly a joke video. Do I really think the world's going to fall apart? Personally, I feel it's inevitable. But that's not the point. I just feel like it's good to know what you need, the bare minimum of what you need, for anybody who's worried about the topic. Likewise, if you're like me and you really think that it's inevitable, not just a possibility, but something that eventually is going to happen, you should be growing more actively than just preparing a variety you know will work. Though a lot of people I know that are big-time doomsday types have never even done that. I think that if you're really worried about it, you should be starting a garden like I have. Permaculture, self-sufficient kind of garden. I mean, every time I walk out here, I get free food. I'm not caring for a lot of these things hardly at all. This raspberry hasn't been watered since last summer, and there are a lot more raspberries than this on it. You know, sweet, delicious, and another apple right next to it. You know, I've got things everywhere. If you really think things are getting bad, be proactive. Be the person that's going to feed yourself, feed your family, maybe even feed your community. You know, just things to think about. The main thing is, I don't want anyone to walk away from this video feeling like, oh, you know, I've got to start preparing. No, just start worrying about feeding yourself. It'll save you money. It'll save you some worries down the road. Don't worry about the world ending. Right now, that's way out of your control, way out of my control. Worry about how you're going to feed yourself if things get a little more expensive. Start with that. Once you start with that, you can worry about plenty of other things down the road. So, hope this video was more calming than inflammatory. Hope this video gave you some ideas on what to start working with and what to improve. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. And hopefully I can come back with another great video sometime soon. Maybe one that's a little less offensive to everybody. Check out these asparagus berries forming. Inedible, but pretty cool. Have a great day, everybody. And I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.